1971, WDO's Interdesign program has brought designers from around the world together to collaborate, exchange ideas, and tackle real-world challenges through design. From bread production and distribution in the former USSR to medical design in Hungary and design for body and mind in the Republic of Korea, the Interdesign program's value is really placing multidisciplinary teams in local contexts for 2 intensive weeks, where they co-create design-led solutions.
Over the past year, WDO has been collaborating with our 2 member organizations, Design Center of the Philippines and De La Salle College of St. Benilde, to build the next iteration of our Interdesign program on Siargao Island, one of the Philippines' most dynamic coastal environments. Next year, under the theme of Design Innovation and Resiliency for the Tropics, Interdesign Siargao Island will bring together designers, researchers, and interdisciplinary practitioners to engage in hands-on, impact-driven design at the intersection of climate, culture, and place.
In this session, we'll hear from design anthropologist Dr. Pamela Cajilig, who is the Design Research and Strategy Director for Interdesign Siargao Island. She reflects on resilience in the context of this small, climate-vulnerable community. Drawing on local ethnographic research, she explores how participatory design can strengthen adaptation and support recovery. We're really looking forward to the work we'll accomplish alongside her next year.
Hi, Pamela. Thanks so much for joining us as part of Let's Talk Resilience. As you know, WDO is hosting this event in celebration of World Industrial Design Day this year, really as a way to bring together global perspectives on what designing for resilience looks like across different communities, industries, and disciplines. As we mentioned in our introduction, your chosen discipline, so to speak, is design anthropology, and you've been working with WDO and our member organization, Design Center of the Philippines, as our design research and strategy director over the last few months as part of our upcoming Interdesign residency program on Siargao Island. So maybe before we dive into today's conversation, we can start with kind of your own journey. Can you tell me a little bit about your background in design anthropology and how that connects to the work that you're currently undertaking as part of our Interdesign program?
Right. So I did not start out as a design anthropologist. I actually worked in consumer research and marketing for a long time. That was my first career. And then I got a bit burned out and I decided to study anthropology. My master's thesis was on fashion and nationalism. And around the time that I graduated, Typhoon Haiyan, or Yolanda as we know it in the Philippines, struck. And I was working with a women's rights organization who had some funding to do humanitarian shelter. And since I was the only design person that they knew, they partnered with me, and I ended up working with a team of architects walking across villages that were severely hit by the typhoon. And there was no turning back after that. I started to focus on design anthropology, particularly, and in particular, architecture. So I like to design and to define design anthropology as taking seriously the lived experiences and the knowledge of people who identify as marginalized and vulnerable, including their skills in making and skills in working with materials. So we're doing exactly that for the WDO Interdesign program in Siargao. So we are starting with contextual and ethnographic research to make sure that the 4 themes of the residency are grounded in local knowledge and local experiences.
And our theme for Interdesign Siargao Island is design innovation and resiliency for the tropics. And that's also kind of how, this theme for World Industrial Design Day came about. It was really in alignment with a lot of the conversations that we were having as part of this Interdesign program that we've been building with Design Center. So I'm wondering whether from a personal perspective or a professional standpoint, when you think about designing for resilience, what does that mean for you?
Right. I'm really glad you asked that, because when we talk about resilience, particularly here in the Philippines, there is a tendency to think of it as like an individual trait or a collective trait. Like Filipinos are naturally resilient, which means that, if you see people who have been affected by calamity, smiling in front of their damaged house, they're already resilient. But that's not really the case. I like to think of design as a systems problem, designing for resilience as a systems frame. When we look at how, say, governance, how decisions are being made, and how this impacts health systems, housing, infrastructure, livelihood, and how these interrelate with each other, then we can begin to think more proactively about long-term resilience rather than just being responsive.
In kind of the description that you provided of the work that you've undertaken over the course of your career, you talked a little bit about how you've worked with disaster affected communities across different contexts, right? With different organizations and different kind of practitioners. I'm wondering, when you reflect back on some of the experiences that you've had working directly with these communities who've been affected by, whether they be climate related disasters or whatnot. Has there been one experience that's kind of fundamentally changed or shaped the way that you think about resilience?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely when I was working on the ground with Typhoon Haiyan, in the aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan, we had started with, design thinking with communities to build permanent housing, was something that has been decided on by the donors and funders in partnership with us. And we were thinking that it's just a matter of consulting the community on what kind of design of permanent housing was needed. But as we interacted with the community, it became clear that permanent housing was not necessarily the solution with the amount of funding that we have. So we ended up consulting them on not just how the structure should be designed, but what structure should be designed. And that's how we ended up with the first gender responsive evacuation center in the Visayas region. And we worked with once that has been identified, we worked with the community on the design. We worked with them on implementation via a Cash for Work program. So that was really end to end. I got to see the process end to end in partnering with communities and defining the problem to creating the structure. And that was very formative for me as a design anthropologist, because I became such an advocate of participatory design processes after that.
Which is really kind of inherent to the Interdesign program as well, right? This participatory approach to building the program, also what the program is going to look like on the ground in the community. Thinking about the context of Siargao specifically, we know that this is an island in the Philippines that's really renowned for its natural beauty, its biodiversity. It was also severely impacted. The community was severely impacted in 2021 with Typhoon Odette. I'm wondering, when you think about the island, what kind of makes it a particularly compelling case study for design innovation and resiliency in practice?
Well, one thing that we noticed in Siargao when we visited there recently for the design residency was how active civil society is in Siargao. So there's just a huge amount of enthusiasm and desire to make things work, to make sure that the problems of similar islands won't be replicated with the rapidly growing tourism industry in Siargao and its growing disaster vulnerability. So that's one thing that makes it really a special context to work in for interdesign.
Yeah, we're very much looking forward to this program. As you know, Interdesign is one of WU's oldest programs. It was established way back when in 1971, and since then we've had over 45 interdesigns across the globe. This will be our first interdesign in the Philippines, and we're very much looking forward to kind of building on this partnership with a design center and the impact that this is going to have for the local community. You mentioned participatory design approaches, right? The fact that this is kind of integral to your work, and also the fact that this has been built into the interdesign framework that we'll be employing as part of the program. I'm wondering, when it comes to building resilience, we often think of, designers coming into a community and building solutions, and it's not always done in collaboration or in, the local context. So what happens when communities are treated not just as stakeholders, but also kind of active partners as part of this process, which is very much kind of what we're hoping to build as part of the Interdesign program?
Right. Well, first of all, their right to be heard is respected. That's very fundamental.
Yeah.
Secondly, is ownership and trust. So just the act of being open to what they have to say and seriously considering their knowledge and experiences really goes a long way in terms of building partnerships for resilience, because resilience is a long-term commitment, and it
Mhm.
entails a lot of communities and a lot of organizations and government institutions working together. And
Mhm.
without that fundamental cornerstone of trust and relationship, it's so easy for plans to fall apart. And
Mhm.
lastly is contextual relevance.
Mhm.
There are many prepackaged, designed for resilience solutions, all well-intentioned, I must say. But when it comes to operationalizing this on the ground, we really need to be conscious of, the real world realities that they're going up against,
Mhm.
whether it's, lack of infrastructure, or whether it's, particular dynamics between communities. Involving communities from the get-go ensures that all these real world considerations are at the top of the agenda and are thought of at the
Mhm.
beginning of projects, not along the way, and we can be more responsive to them.
Right. You mentioned, Pamela, the ethnographic research that you've kind of been working towards, or putting forth as part of your role in this interdesign. And you were actually on Siargao Island earlier this year. I'm wondering, what was some of the feedback, or those conversations that you were having on the ground with community members about some of the issues that the island is facing?
Well, top of mind for them is really the impact of tourism in the
Mm.
island, which
Mhm.
has opened up, livelihood opportunities, but it is also stressing the ecosystem of the island, the coral reefs. It's also stressing certain systems like the waste management
Mhm.
system. So we like to see these tensions between systems as design entry points, as thought starters for the designers who will be participating in their residency.
Hmm. Hmm. It's a good point. I think you mentioned designers, but I also want to share that interdesign is also brings together. It's multidisciplinary in
Yeah.
kind of the people that it brings together. So we bring together designers, researchers, practitioners from across the globe, and across a wide range of disciplines. From your perspective as a design anthropologist, what role does this interdisciplinary collaboration play in building resilience? And I'm wondering, what can designers learn from working across different fields?
There's no one size fits all solution to resilience because it is inherently an interdisciplinary problem. So
Hmm.
it's really important that WDO is bringing in not just designers, but also, social scientists, ecologists to work on the problem. And all of us, regardless of what discipline we work in, we have our biases, we
Hmm.
have our blind spots. And so working in interdisciplinary teams ensures that, those blind spots are covered and that the cross-pollination of ideas is there because not there's no single discipline that holds the key to the challenges of resilience.
Right. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That's really what we're hoping to capture with the World Industrial Design Day program, and the campaign that we've built this year. I think resilience, as you kind of captured, means something different to everyone, depending on your background, depending where you live, what, kind of what you practice, the kind of design that you
Mhm.
practice. And when we think about resilience, it's often framed as kind of the ability to recover after disruption. So based on your expertise, how do you think design can help communities not only recover, but also adapt and thrive kind of in this era of, rapid digital transformation and climate change that we're facing as a
Mhm.
society?
Well, if we're looking at interdisciplinary design, I think that looking at design and designers and whoever is participating in the residency as brokers of ideas is really going to be helpful because as an island community, you have your own realities and your own view of what needs to be done is very important and needs to be integral in the planning. But also new ideas for innovation, new ways of solving problems is also important. We
Mhm.
have to keep experimenting because no one has, the final answer to what makes for a resilient island or a resilient community.
Mhm.
So that mindset of design where you're always iterating, you're always experimenting and testing new methods. I
Mhm.
think that ethos is going to be very important to the residency. And
Mhm.
I would also like to add that one of the things that I appreciate about design as an anthropologist is design is a future-oriented discipline
Yeah.
because you're thinking of how can the world be better if I create this system or I create this object, then how will that make the world a better place? And that is so important to resilience, especially in a world where the uncertainties of climate change, of rapid biodiversity loss, and the plastics problem are sort of spiraling out of control. We need to imagine the future. We need to imagine what change can look like so
Mhm.
that we can plan for it.
Mhm. I totally agree. And hopefully kind of the interdesign on Siargao Island can be, you know, a powerful example of how communities can move ahead. Just one more question, Pamela, to close. I'm wondering, you know, as I mentioned at the top of this conversation, you've been collaborating with WDO and Design Center for a number of months now. I'm wondering what's been kind of the most rewarding part of this collaborative process so far?
I think it's really the interdisciplinarity of it. It's been amazing getting to work with, WDO representatives, uh, representatives from the design center, as well as designers and fellow social science researchers to be on the ground in Siargao and learning together with the communities on how resilience challenges can be addressed. That has been really rewarding, the in-person experience of it all. And I really can't wait for the participants of Interdesign to witness that and experience that as well.
Yeah, we share that excitement. We're very much looking forward to it. I think for sure those in-person connections on the ground, you know, connections with community members, is kind of what this program has been built for. That was my last question. I want to thank you, Pamela, so much for taking the time to join us, to share your insights and your expertise, also more largely as part of our Interdesign program. And thank you again for joining us to celebrate World Industrial Design Day. And to all of you tuning in, happy World Industrial Design Day from WDO.